Second chances. There are too many Rikers.
The Enterprise is in orbit over a planet that was evacuated by Starfleet 8 years ago, and they are waiting to retrieve data that was left behind.
In 10 Forward, Riker is fake playing jazz on his trombone, but the fake instrument playing wasn't as bad as it's been in the past.
After the band finishes the piece, Riker asks for requests. Troy adamantly requests Nightbird, which she tells Beverly Riker has been trying to get right for years.
For 10 years. He's been trying to play one piece for 10 years. If it's taken that long, he's doing something wrong.
But before he can start playing, he is called to the bridge.
Data says they're ready to beam down to the station because they modified the transporters using the other ship's logs,
which will allow them to beam through the distortion field over the planet, whatever that is.
And he also points out that the transporters are way better than last time Riker was there, which Riker says is good, because he almost didn't make it off 8 years ago. And Data says even so, they'll only have a few short windows to beam down and back.
Riker beams down as part of an away team, and he says it looks like someone has been down there.
Worf says someone is coming, and it turns out to be a second Riker.
Each of these Rikers reacts in a fairly calm way to seeing a double of themselves. I thought it was a little unrealistic.
With all the shit they see every week, they're used to all that stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Yellow Riker says because of the distortion field, he wasn't able to transport off the station 8 years ago, which Red Riker says can't be true since he's been around putting his leg up on stuff for the past 6 seasons.
They send the Yellow Riker to sickbay, where Beverly examines him.
She says Yellow Riker is identical to Red Riker except for his brain patterns, which are formed from experiences. But she says they're as unique as fingerprints, which was probably not the best comparison, since those are not formed from experience and could probably be easily replicated.
She also says he can't be a clone because there's no genetic drift, but genetic drift is a measure of the frequency of certain genetic traits in a population, not an individual person. They have a meeting where Geordi gives us some gobbledygook about how the transporter operator made 2 containment beams of Riker's pattern just in case to get through the distortion field, and one of them ended up beaming a second Riker back onto the planet for some reason.
It's jumping through way too many hoops, and Geordi's explanation has a ton of somehows and maybes scattered throughout, which is always a great sign of solid writing.
They tell Red Riker that Yellow Riker is another him who has had different experiences for the past 8 years. If he was stuck down on that planet for 8 years, he must have been super bored, and he seems to have held it together pretty well.
When Red Riker says they still need to retrieve the data down below, and Data says the systems have all been altered by Yellow Riker, Picard suggests asking him for help. But Beverly says she wants to make sure he's stable, and Troy volunteers to talk to him.
She probably wanted to interact with a Riker that hadn't seen a woman in 8 years. She visits him, and he immediately calls her Imzadi and starts hugging and kissing her.
After explaining that after 8 years things might not be exactly as he left them, Troy says that she and Red Riker did not continue their relationship when he prioritized his career over her.
Yellow Riker talks about how lonely he was down on the planet, and that only the thought of her kept him going.
And he makes statements that Beverly would probably want to hear to make her "is he stable" determination.
There were days that I was so lonely I thought I might lose my mind.
But Troy pretty much ignores all of that.
Troy asks him if he'll help them retrieve the data, and he says yes. And as she awkwardly goes to leave, he tells her his feelings for her haven't changed, which only made things more awkward.
The away team is ready to beam down, but Yellow Riker is late. And once he shows up, Red Riker is pretty ticked off.
He chides Yellow Riker for it, showing that he hasn't realized that 2 Rikers are more powerful than 1, and they could take over the ship if they teamed up.
After they beam down, both Rikers are doing as good of a job as they can to look in the direction they're supposed to be looking in, but it was only partially successful. Yellow Riker says the data is stored in the core beneath the station, but they might be able to access it from where they are if things aren't too damaged.
Red Riker suggests they talk to their dad about what happened, mentioning that they've patched things up, but Yellow Riker says he'd rather not see him.
And of all episodes to be referenced, that is not one I would have expected.
And I was hoping it would lead to an Ambojitsu match, but it didn't.
Ah, that would have been sweet.
I mean, it would have worked too with just the whole layout of the episode.
Even after messing with stuff, they still can't access the data, and will have to go underneath the station to the core. Data says the transport window is about to close, and Red Riker says they'll just wait for the next window.
As they prepare to beam out, Yellow Riker still walks off and says he'll stay, so Red Riker gets pissed, and we get a very awkward shot of the two of them.
I imagine that shot took a long time to put together. Later, Troy finds a note in her room telling her to go to engineering, where she finds a poem and a flower. And the poem is not about dicks. So through the power of deduction, we know it's not from Picard, since we've seen that's what his poems are like.
She follows a trail of notes that he's left her, which fortunately no one seems to have found, even though they're all right out in the open.
And some of them are in dangerous areas of the ship, like taped to the giant fusion reactor that's always about to explode.
The clues lead her to 10 Forward, where Yellow Riker has left her a souvenir from the last time they saw each other before he ended up on the station.
It's an etching that looks like freaking Junji Ito made it, complete with creepy-ass alien plants. Yellow Riker pops up, and they have a mini counseling session. He wants to get his career going again.
And he tells her he hasn't stopped thinking about her.
He says that sometimes, if he thought he tried hard enough, he can make her feel his presence, which just reinforces that this dude is and has been crazy for the past 8 years.
Troy also admits that she imagined that he could sense her thinking about him.
Which very well may be true, because her psychic reach seems to fluctuate all the time. Who's to say it didn't reach across the entire universe?
And Troy admits that she was disappointed when Red Riker never met back up with her because he focused on his career.
Picard calls Red Riker to his ready room and says Yellow Riker told him the plan about going beneath the station to access the core.
Red Riker is upset, but he ends up agreeing to the plan. He goes to Yellow Riker and complains about how Yellow Riker tried to go over his head.
And he tells him if he can't follow orders, to get the out. Beverly and Troy are doing Klingon Tai Chi, and Beverly's being nosy, trying to figure out how far things have gone between Troy and Yellow Riker when Yellow Riker enters.
Beverly quickly leaves.
And Troy and Yellow Riker Tai Chi at each other? I'm not sure of the exact terminology.
Troy explains to him what Klingon Tai Chi is, and Yellow Riker says it's very similar to regular Tai Chi. But you would think he would already know what she was doing in there if he walked in already dressed in uniform.
Of course he did. The subtleties of Beverly's matchmaking is obviously lost on you.
He shows off his own moves, and Troy takes him down. Then they make out.
And I have expected Beverly to be recording the whole thing from around the corner, having not actually left. Later, Troy goes to 10 Forward to talk to Red Riker, and without any prompting, he says she doesn't need to ask for permission to be in a relationship with Yellow Riker, which was kind of a weird thing to say, and he tells her to be careful.
He warns Troy that this other Riker would have made the same career choices if he had gotten off the planet.
But see, I thought he told her to be careful because he was actually a dangerous psychopath, which meant that Yellow Riker was too, and now his secret was in danger of surfacing.
That would have been an interesting plot twist. Red Riker is officiating a poker game with Data and Worf when Yellow Riker walks in, intending to speak with Red Riker alone.
Yellow Riker joins the game, and then we get a way too on-the-nose conversation that reflects what's going on in the episode as they continually race each other.
You always had the better hand in everything.
They treat it so seriously and so importantly, but it's just a random-ass poker game. And the two Rikers trying to outplay each other was as over-the-top as it could possibly have been.
All I could focus on is how much they're raising each other with these chips, but the chips are meaningless since they don't actually use currency to back it up. I see you and raise you another 10 billion. Who gives a shit? Later, Yellow Riker tells Troy that Picard got him a job on another ship, and he wants her to come with him.
Troy tells him she's happy with the life that she's made for herself on the Enterprise, but Yellow Riker says he can't stay on the ship while Red Riker is on board.
She says she doesn't want to put herself in the position of being pushed aside in favor of Riker's career.
And she says she'll think about it.
The last transport window's open, so the away team beams down to retrieve the data following Yellow Riker's plan, and he and Red Riker go underneath the station.
Data says that humans seem to value their individuality, and meeting a double of themselves seems to make them uncomfortable.
He asks Worf if he would have trouble interacting with the double of himself, and I liked Worf's reaction after Data agrees that he's hard to get along with.
I am not easy to get along with.
And then Worf starts dropping Klingon knowledge bombs.
Well, perhaps it is more a matter of seeing something in your double. Something you do not like in yourself.
The Rikers go down into the caverns under the base, and Yellow Riker keeps asking Red Riker for his orders, in a very sarcastic manner.
Yellow Riker suddenly detects radiation and says they need to get out, But then Red Riker just walks over to the giant on-off switch and turns the damn thing off, telling Riker not to give up right away like a little bitch.
They proceed across a walkway, but the combined weight of 2 Rikers proves to be too much, and it collapses.
Yellow Riker's trying not to fall, and he acts like he can't find a foothold, even though they're right there, and he tells Red Riker to let him go.
But Red Riker refuses and forces him to climb up, and they successfully retrieve the data.
I thought for a moment there that after he made it back up, Yellow Riker was going to push Red Riker into the hole, basically take over his life. The way the scene was shot made it look that way to me. Later on the ship, Yellow Riker is getting ready to leave, and Troy says she won't be joining him, because she's not ready to give up the life she's made for herself.
Red Riker walks in and gives Yellow Riker his trombone as a gift.
No, he gives him half of a trombone, which is completely useless. I didn't see the slide anywhere, and the bag looked otherwise empty. What a dick move.
I mean, it's the future. They could have come up with like a collapsible one or something. Yellow Riker says he's decided to go by Thomas, their middle name. He kisses Troy goodbye and tells Red Riker to take care of her,
saying he can wait for her a little longer.
Which means he'll be waiting forever.
Second chances. Overall?
This was an episode with kind of a dumb premise, but I thought it worked out as a good way to explore Riker as a character. We've had some episodes focusing on Riker before, and they usually did a really bad job of getting underneath the surface. It was mostly just him getting angry at other people, like his dad or whatever. I kind of wish they had focused on Red Riker a little bit more and his reaction to seeing Yellow Riker. The entire situation of seeing another Riker was handled very casually by pretty much everybody. They accept it pretty quickly, and they just kind of go along with it. And I guess there have been a lot of other situations like this, but this would make me even more afraid of using the transporter. Although at the same time, if somebody figured out how to do this on purpose, there was no reason they couldn't just keep cloning themselves and, take over a planet or something. I mean, we've talked a lot about how the transporter is always very ambiguous as to what all it's capable of and how it works, and this is just another example of that. I really liked all the stuff between Troy and both Rikers. The stuff between the 2 Rikers was a little bit over the top, but overall I enjoyed this episode, and I didn't expect to. And I'm really glad that they didn't kill Yellow Riker off like I thought they would. That would have been such an easy out. And I'm glad they color-coded them so that we could tell them apart.
They also had different hairstyles, which was less obvious. And we missed an opportunity to just call them ketchup and mustard the whole time. I would have relished that.
I give this episode a B+.
I also gave this episode a B+. It's too bad we couldn't have a slim Riker versus a not slim Riker, or at the very least, a beardless Riker versus a bearded Riker. This episode could have been really goofy and rife with dumb who's who jokes, and I'm surprised the writers held themselves back. Maybe they were all fired. It's season 6 now, so those people are probably long gone. The only mention of things outside the Enterprise bubble was when Riker brought up his dad, and I would have liked to see more discussion about the external consequences of there being 2 Rikers. I thought it was annoying that Beverly said, "I want to make sure Yellow Riker is stable before we let him do anything." But even after he proved he was not stable, they still let him do whatever he wanted. Neither one of the Rikers seemed to actually take Troy's feelings into account. Red Riker seemed to just want to stick it to Yellow Riker, and Yellow Riker really only seemed to care about how it affected him. So I say she made the right move by putting this episode behind her. I will do the same. And now they can use the transporters to straight up clone people, and this was by accident. All of these crazy science things with the transporter always happen by accident, but then they just throw them away. So recreate the circumstances, and since you know what you're doing now, tweak it to be safe or whatever, boom, Attack of the Clones. We'll be reviewing that next week.